Welcome to our conversation around healthcare marketing, truths, myths, and trends happening now. My name is Alan Tam. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Actium Health. I'm also the podcast host on Hello Healthcare. I'm beyond excited to have our esteemed panel members participating in this discussion, and I'll introduce them in just a little bit. Before we begin, I do want to share a couple of simple housekeeping items for our webinar. First of all, we want to make this webinar as engaging and purposeful as possible for all of you who are viewing today. So if you have any questions on the topic of discussion or for a particular panel member, please do submit them in the chat and we'll do our best to get to them during our conversation. We'll also have a few polls that we'll be administering throughout the webinar, and I'd like to highly encourage all of you to participate as we'll be reacting to and addressing the topics and addressing your responses there. And then finally, once the webinar is complete, we will be releasing our survey report on the state of healthcare marketing, which will include a lot of the content that we'll be covering today in our conversation. So no need to screenshot or capture that. You're welcome to do so as well, but they will all be in the report that we will be releasing. The link to the report will be posted in the chat. You will also receive a link in the follow-up email post-webinar as well. There will also be a post-webinar survey at the end of today's session. Please do take a few seconds. I believe it's only 4 questions. So just take a few seconds to complete the survey so that we can continue to design better webinars for you in the future. All right, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to all of you our panel for today's webinar. First up, we have Mr. Gordon Kolodny, who is in healthcare marketing, strategy, and a business development leader. He is a senior executive director of marketing at Cedars-Sinai. Gordon is responsible for marketing strategy domestically and internationally for consumers and referring physicians. He's also responsible for marketing acquisition and awareness efforts, including brand strategy, advertising, both traditional and digital, call center operations, sponsorships, and insurance messaging. Mr. James Gardner is a marketing and business development executive with 20 years of experience leading and advising B2C and B2B organizations. He currently serves clients as the head of healthcare strategy with OHO Interactive and is also on faculty at Boston's Northeastern University. And last, but definitely not the least, Mr. Tom Hileman, who has more than 20 years of experience in the marketing and information technology disciplines, and he now leverages that expertise specifically in digital marketing. He's held a variety of management roles at Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM, and is an expert at leveraging solutions for business growth and success. His company, the Hileman Group, which is now part of Global Prairie, specializes in digital marketing solutions in healthcare and other industries, and offers the expertise and technological tools to help clients target and capture customers. Gentlemen, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
So very excited to have a conversation with all of you today. And as the title of the webinar suggests, what's going on in healthcare marketing? It's definitely been an exciting year so far. What are some of the trends that y'all are seeing?
I mean, you want to go, James? Go for it.
No, I insist you go first.
All right. We will go with the first bald man among the panel to go first. All right. So everyone's getting back to post-pandemic life. And I think that's sort of the exciting part and the challenging part in terms of being able to turn on your acquisition minds, which has been a little bit dormant in the last couple of years. The challenge is the fact that everyone is getting crushed from a budget and a reimbursement perspective. So it's managing both those expectations, knowing that to a lot of folks, I'm sure on this call and are experiencing this themselves, that where budgets are getting tighter, individuals within the teams may be shrinking in many ways, but the expectations to be able to grow volume back to maybe where it was is kind of getting put back into the play of things. And I'll throw one more thing under the mix too, at least the way it is at Cedars, which is a very full shop. And so census can be very tough and tight, and it's not necessarily good volume from a reimbursement perspective. It's challenging volume. So it's being able to have to kind of put back your KPIs and where your focus needs to be, with less dollars, higher expectations, and a harder push for capacity.
I really like that thinking, Gordon, and thanks for adding that. I come at the world through a lens of consumer marketing, and I can't help but be struck by the acceleration and amplification of consumer empowerment and consumer first thinking in the world of healthcare, and whether that's motivated by the web creating more and more knowledge that consumers are able to access to inform their decisions about when, where, and how, and if to seek care, which is amazing in and of itself. But it's also accelerated by the move towards high deductible plans, which are motivating patients to really pay attention to cost and quality, and the availability of more and more options as to where care is sought, whether that's through digital solutions or retail health solutions, which we can get into. But that's a really powerful phenomena, which I'm very excited about, and I hope we can explore further.
No, and James, I agree. I mean, consumerism's been here for a while, and I think what you're talking about is the extension of that. To Gordon's point, reimbursements are challenging. I think one of the biggest things we're seeing from our clients is getting the right volume to the right place at the right time. That includes payer mix, to Gordon's point on that. So I think that's a key challenge we see in front of us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a couple of things that I think are really recent trends. Obviously, AI is impacting our efficiency and how we do things. And then, of course, data privacy and the pixel issues of tracking are just really hot at the moment. Literally, everyone's talking about that because it impacts how we measure what we do. So I think those are some key trends.
Absolutely. So from the survey report that we conducted earlier this year, these were some of the key findings that we were able to, that came back from healthcare marketers. 90%, 92% of marketers, healthcare marketers, are responsible for patient acquisition, patient volume, and driving appointments. 47% report their biggest success has been on patient volume, driving appointments. 71% say, appointment bookings is kind of what they've been focusing on. 76% report that their outpatient volumes have increased over the past 12 months. 1 in 3 say the area where they have the most room for improvement is really around referrals. So these are some of the key findings. We'd love to get your take on these key findings. Obviously, a lot has changed since the beginning of the year. Tom, you brought up generative AI, which has definitely been a hot topic the last couple months. We see some movement as well in the M&A side with today's announcement of Kaiser Permanente acquiring Geisinger. So a lot of things are happening. What's your reaction to some of the key findings here? We'll start with you, Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, this resonates obviously incredibly powerfully for me, for sure. The piece that I would say is really where my team and my head is at in terms of our institution is it's not just about volume and appointments, it's really about the financials. It's really about the net income impact that we're driving, and really being able to hopefully have a system in place where we're fortunate enough to measure the truly marketing sourced activity that comes in through the institution. That's such a huge, important piece that I know is not super easy in a lot of big systems for sure. So when you have that ability to be able to track that accountability, and obviously Tom mentioned the pixels being that much more harder to be able to really pinpoint that. But if you're able to be able to really kind of attribute the right activity and then follow that through your own versions of whatever data warehouses you have, that's the key to being able to really determine your success and true ROI, and a way to be able to go to leadership and say, hey, we need to be able to invest more in order to bring in this growth. And as I mentioned before, with budgets being so tight, I know on my side, if we don't have that data to be able to demonstrate why this campaign, this messaging platform, whatever we want to be able to do, is going to be able to drive not only volume and appointments, but the right volume and the right appointments that bring in the right reimbursement, it's that much harder for us to be able to get things approved these days.
Can I build on that, Alan?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of really great insight there. And that's what also I'm seeing is just the growing sophistication of marketers like Gordon's team, who let's be honest, they're the cutting edge. That's why they're on the webinar today. And they're showing the way of really being targeted and smart about the patient mix and the patients that they're actually seeking out, because not every patient acquired or retained is the same. And smart marketers like Gordon's team realize that. They're looking at payer mix, but they're also looking at service line capacity and being very informed about who they're acquiring, who they're serving, and how they're going to market. I really like that. And I encourage more marketers to kind of follow that path that Gordon's team is forging.
Yeah, I'd follow up on that. I mean, I think the acquisition, the 92% of marketers in the corner there, it's really important to get the right volume at the right time. Matching capacity and utilization is just critical, right? So I think we're going to be called on as marketers not only to bring in acquisition, but also using our reactivation and retention methods to really help fill the funnel or fill the schedules for the clinical operations. So I know that our conversations are heavily focused on that, the right people, right patients, right time, and then keeping utilization at high across the entire enterprise and not just one specific specialty or primary or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. I think those are spot on. That's kind of what we're seeing as well here at Actium Health. One thing that has really been at the forefront of a lot of the conversations recently is healthcare consumerism and how expectations and behaviors have really affected and changed healthcare marketer strategies and tactics, right? I mean, there's, Gordon, you probably know best, and, and Tom and James as well. There's a lot of focus on building the brand. There's a lot of focus on building loyalty. There's a lot of focus on engagement traction, and so forth. What are some of the key things that you guys have seen that has really fueled and driven some of the strategies and tactics that you guys are using today?
If I could, Alan, let me ask Gordon a question.
Yeah.
We teed this up kind of ahead of time. Gordon, at Cedars-Sinai, are you dealing with patients or consumers or both? And how do you think about that? Which I think is a nice preface to Alan's question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's the classic one. And I think in general, there's lingo and language and lexicon you can use within your own team and internally, and then how you sort of flip that when you're kind of conveying that message outwards. To me, I may be a little bit more old school, but I still view them a lot as patients, because that's really their main touch point to us and their interaction with us. And then whether it's in the beginning stages when they don't even realize they may become a patient, versus whether they are in the system and then you want them to really be sticky and loyal and all the great stuff that Alan was referencing with retention and engagement. So we may use the word consumers when we're talking internally, but when we sort of push that forward facing, we like to try to make it a little bit more personal and a little bit more pure to the system. For us, Alan, back to kind of where your point is in terms of what we're seeing, it's all about options. That's for really the big thing that we're trying to do, at least at Cedars, is to not have there be only one way to be able to engage with us, or one way to be able to have a conversation with us. And it's been challenging, and we're doing some great initial work with Tom and his team over at Global Prairie to be able to kind of build on that momentum. And we're a little bit behind in ways in terms of a classic CRM strategy and being able to really stay on point to communications to folks, to be able to really hit them with messaging that's relevant and important to them, and not kind of cold and impersonal where they may only have 2% of the information they're interested in and 98% that they're not. But when it comes to things like getting into the system, scheduling appointments, or being able to engage, we're really digging in deep and doing a lot more on digital, which of course is everyone's favorite term these days, but scheduling digital appointments, being able to engage with folks through telehealth and video visits, and things through on demand and through chat, in ways that, again, if they're those individuals who are in that stage of they're not necessarily looking for that warm, personal, on the phone experience initially, and then being able to go to the brick and mortar in the institution and schedule it and have that in-person visit, and they're looking more for that quick, easier, more flexible solution. That's the sort of direction that our folks are going on, to be able to address it on all sides, because there's never going to be one size that fits all.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback in a little bit there, I prefer the word patience. I think patients have activities that are consumer behaviors. So if you think urgent care, or you think some of the virtual visits, which are traditionally more consumerist, meeting them where they are, where they want to be at the time, right? And then there's other places where they're really patient. So things like the referral management, things like high acuity disease. So if someone has pancreatic cancer, there's not really any decisions to be made, right? And it's an immediate, the patient makes decisions. There's not a marketing touch point to those things. So I think that we need to look at the spectrum of how patients engage, and then make sure, as Gordon described, that they have options for the parts of their interactions with the system that are consumer-like, right? The urgent care and those types of visits.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at what our surveys have kind of found in terms of marketing tactics and tools. So let me share this particular graph here. So these are the results from our survey report that identifies the marketing tactics and their effectiveness. So you can see here that it looks like paid media campaigns definitely a leader. And oftentimes that is really driven by patient acquisition. You also have ad hoc campaigns promoting specific services. That's going to be focused a lot more on patients versus paid media campaigns. They may not be patients yet. Some may, but some are going to be new patient acquisition. And then as you kind of trickle down the graph here to the right, more and more so that is definitely more patient oriented and less consumer oriented. What's your reaction to what you're seeing here? And this time, let's start with Tom. Tom, you have a broad swath, a really good perspective on the industry across all your clients. Does this resonate with what you're seeing, and why is it this way?
So I think everyone likes paid media because you have the ability to track precisely like spend and results. So I think the effectiveness might be a little bit overstated. Some of the other tactics, for instance, always on campaigns, which we leverage a lot, are, I would say, every bit the ROI that you get from pure paid media campaigns. But many organizations can't measure as precisely, and so paid media gives them the ability to go to executives and say, we put this return on ad spend in, we spent this kind of money, and we got these kind of results. So I would say in general, it references it. Online scheduling, for instance, is another one. I mean, to me, it's table stakes. I mean, it has to be, everyone should be able to online schedule. Now, there's a lot of differences when it comes to primary versus kind of specialty care, and getting doctors to adopt that, as Gordon can probably shake his head on. That's the organizational change is the most difficult there. But in general, I think these are roughly aligned. I'd like a little less ad hoc in the world. I think if people were more consistently leveraging campaigns, they'd have better effectiveness of the results.
Yeah, it's interesting here that the discrepancy between the usage and effectiveness is also the greatest for ad hoc campaigns as well as direct mail.
Right.
So that's interesting.
I prefer to call them random acts of marketing. So we should be doing less ad hoc, more customer, and then we'll get to talking about patient journeys as we go, right? It should be an orchestrated journey for the patients and less kind of ad hoc for a specific awareness month or a specific, hey, we need volume just right here kind of thing.
James, what are your thoughts? How does this jive with what's going on in retail health?
Oh, I would agree with Tom's take completely. I was overall just struck by the chasm between usage and effectiveness across the board. There's tactics being used that seemingly there's doubt about their effectiveness. And the chasm is largest, as Tom pointed out, for these ad hoc campaigns. So yeah, let's do less of those. Let's definitely do less of those.
One of the questions from our audience, one of our audience members, would love to get your take on this. Jenna states that we can't magically bring in patients with an ad campaign, no matter how much money you put into it. How do we better partner with admin and other staff to make positive changes to retain and gain patients? Maybe Gordon, if you want to take a first crack in terms of sharing some of the best practices and insights from a leading health system like Cedar, what advice here can you provide Jenna?
Yeah, I mean, so much of the successfulness of a campaign starts and stops with the partnerships you guys have, or we have, I should say. I'll speak on my own side with our clinical operations folks and our physician leaders, and then having the data to be able to come in armed with the right information. So it's not just a, hey, I want you to do this and put my name on a big shiny billboard, versus whether this is really where we need to be going. Often I feel that at times the likelihood and more of the sort of nature is that marketers are left either to have to agree and say yes to everything that partners may provide, or to be able to not necessarily have the right data armed to be able to make informed decisions. So it's not just kind of a guessing game or things where you say, hey, this was done at said institution that is where they may be seeing similar messaging, so we need to do a similar type of thing. I agree. Throwing money at things isn't always the right thing to do, even though where I think Tom was going, it can be the easiest because it's simple. Then it's Babel once you've got the budget and you can measure it at least from an impressions and a view perspective. What I would suggest is really, again, trying to get as educated and knowledgeable to what really are the activities that need to be brought into the institution, and ask the most simple fundamental questions and play the role of the parent and the therapist to sort of say, what are you really trying to accomplish? What does success look like? Where do you really have capacity? Where are there opportunities to really bring in patients where it's not going to be a 6-month wait? And where do we think from an institution perspective, we have the right ROI, assuming that ROI is the main metric here, to be able to really measure that. And then it's about targeting those messages and effectively to the best of the team's ability, opposed to just blanketing things in a very cold, impersonal, informal way.
Thank you, Gordon. I think that's super insightful. Hopefully that was sufficient for Jenna. I do want to compare and contrast here between marketing tactics and another discovery that we made in our survey, which is the execution tools and their effectiveness. So whereas paid media was the number one marketing tactic, here you see from the tools perspective, it's kind of number two. And CRM systems have kind of moved up in terms of their effectiveness as a tool. But to me, paid media versus CRM, one is more acquisition, one is more retention, activation. Why is there this discrepancy? What are your thoughts on how this is playing out between execution tools and their effectiveness versus here, marketing tactics versus their effectiveness? James, why don't we start with you this time?
So to me, these feel like nuggets of gold, awaiting us to pick them off the floor, where we've got low usage levels, relatively speaking, and effectiveness, as signaled by your respondents, that suggests there's ROI opportunities. And I think we're going to get into retention versus acquisition marketing, but this is like a glimpse into the power of CRM marketing, which of course is well known in much of the marketing world. You know, it's easier to retain a customer and serve them better and capitalize on share of wallet and share of spend and whatnot than it is to acquire new customers. And I see here some marketers signaling they get that and they know they should be doing more of it.
Tom, what about you? You touch all of this.
I do, and I would argue that these are not mutually exclusive, or should they be independent, right? So if you think about paid media, really should be back-ended with a marketing automation campaign that should be feeding into a CRM, right? So in theory, I look at this as an orchestration of tactics. But to your question, CRM systems are hard to stand up. So in healthcare, specifically, if you're talking about enterprise CRM, like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, which are the two dominant ones for health systems, there's a lot of work there. There's a lot of gold, for James would say, but there's a hell of a lot of work to get those things set up, configured, and rolling. And by the way, a lot of budget to do that. So they're remarkably effective if you have them in place. But the other tools, I mean, if you look at call centers, they have a large amount of effectiveness for usage, but call centers are really hard too, right? If you want to effectively, I know Gordon, you own one of the call centers there, so you can probably speak to that better than I can, but typically you're tying in your CRM system to your call center to try to do, whether you're doing outbound calls or you're managing the inbound flow, for those pieces. So it's not surprising. Each of these tools has their kind of place. Once again, I think paid media gets a little bit of an overstatement just because it's so easy to track like the top level metrics with it. And some of the other ones are a little more harder to measure the effectiveness with. But I think when people look at this, they should think about how are we going to use these individual tools? And most organizations should have a collection of nearly all of these.
Yeah, I think Tom hit it. Both Tom and James did this very, very well. So much of this is based on where the institution is able to support and invest in these type of things. And it's rarely a situation, or I should say it's tougher to be able to have all, which to Tom's point is the perfect scenario to be able to have everything hemming and humming at the right speed. So often I would imagine the people who filled out this survey, and I can speak to my team, are only blessed and fortunate to have one or two of these things. Or it's done in a way that maybe another group organizes or manages a certain situation. So it's that ability to be able to convince leadership that there's value to what this can bring, which then it requires leadership to be able to really be insightful and say they got to spend to be able to make. Or it's a situation where you got to make do with the best of what you're able to have and how best to optimize that. And, as Tom mentioned, I've been both blessed and cursed to be able to have a call center that I'm able to manage. It's incredible because it's a great way to be able to have trackability and to prove and demonstrate what actually you're able to bring in when you're promoting a phone number and you're having access to be able to see that exact throughput. And then if you can integrate that with your data warehouse, so that you're really able to determine things more than just volume, but actually show what that revenue and net income impact is. It's a curse because it's just a pain to be able to manage, and it's not an easy operation, not an easy industry to stay on top of because it's such a highly turned over type situation. So that's why, again, I look at this stuff and I'm wondering whether people who filled out this survey may have only been speaking specifically to the one area or the two areas that they actually have versus those that don't. The last piece is I wish we as marketers could all put our arms together and wrap each other in collective blankets and make an agreement not to spend money on tactics such as direct mail anymore, right? I wish we could all bond together on certain channels and just say, we're going to cut this thing off, because so much of it is based on, hey, I received this from this institution. You got to be able to do a similar type thing to us. And I'm sure we all have our collective ways of looking and saying, man, if we could just all band together and say, enough's enough. Because I think of the effectiveness of some of these channels are just becoming less and less and harder to manage for sure.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Yeah. Love that push. And I wholeheartedly support and hope it comes true sooner rather than later. One question from one of our viewers, a good friend, Mr. David Prairie, has a question that dives into marketing execution tools a little bit deeper. His question is anyone using text-based tools like Podium to engage patients and or to referring physicians? Tom, you probably know the best.
Yeah, so I can take that one. Not specific. My clients typically aren't using Podium for that. Twilio is another kind of one that you plug in typically in the marketing automation platforms. Not as much on the referring physician side, but for patients and the communications on that, specifically when you have built like a preference center so that you can manage how, and that's ideal. And we'll talk about that. So preference center, basically managing how that individual person wants to communicate with the health system in specific ways. So it's beyond email and phone number, but do you prefer text? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer my chart message or whatever they might be, right? So, but if you do that, then you have to pay it off. So we found texting particularly effective for kind of health alerts. So if someone should be scheduling their annual physical or something that's kind of either chronic or just usual, right? In a wellness example of that. Another area that's actually really effective is outreach into minority populations, particularly in inner cities. So a lot of, if you look at the data, a lot of the neighborhoods of the population there do not have as much smartphone usage as they do texting. And texting is a great way. We've seen that actually around COVID communications, what seems like forever ago, but not that long ago, in terms of reaching specific communities that may not have as much smartphone access. So we've seen there's different applications for text messaging, not as much use with physicians. Physicians, in my experience, have pushed back on that because they're bombarded by so much information flowing through their phones. For other clinical applications that we typically don't use, text as much there.
That's insightful, Tom, and I'm taking notes myself. And I would just add, like, as the parent of a 22-year-old, there's a demographic phenomena probably in play here too, that there's less and less and less desire amongst younger populations in picking up the phone. Like, that's almost off limits completely to receiving a call or making a call. There's a strong desire to self-serve, which is driving us towards chat-based automated solutions, and texting is, in my mind, a logical extension of that, where there's just more and more empowerment of consumers to take care of themselves and serve themselves.
So one of the core things I think for healthcare marketing and just marketing in general is being data driven and being able to measure whether or not your campaign is effective and what you're doing. Is it working? Or even just simply building a baseline. So I'd like to ask all of you in the audience, how is marketing measured at your health system? So we have a poll here that we'd like to ask all of you. If you can just take a second or two to kind of select your answers in terms of what you think is most important for healthcare marketers to measure. And as you guys are completing this, Tom, you work with a lot of different health systems. What do you think? Gordon, would love to know what Cedars, how are you measured and your organization measured?
Well, I can start out, and Gordon, you can maybe comment specifically in Cedars, but most of our health systems are really focused on kind of the financial metrics. What's our return on investment? And that can be measuring contribution margin, can be return on ad spend. There's a few different ways there, but I think in this real budget belt tightening world that we are, when you can have hard numbers of patients, contribution margin, the actual return that you got on the investment, and making sure that the financial people agree with that, of course, they need to agree with the calculations, because that should be step one for everybody to define those metrics with the financial folks, and then have a way to pull that data through either an enterprise data warehouse or a CRM or whatever your mechanism might be. That to me is the one that's resonating the most right now, because you can go and you can defend that budget that I'm spending $1 million here and I'm getting $8 million back in contribution margin. So as the belts get tightened, it's hard for the CFOs to look at that and say, well, that's got real hard return, as opposed to something like a branding communication or others, as Gordon mentioned.
Yeah, and it seems, Alan, that people seem to be leaning towards that realm too, right? Which is those sort of top two categories of volume and financials. And so, again, I think really it depends on how good your systems are, how good your partnership is with your IT team, how well it's sort of set up. And a lot of times the folks on the marketing side are handcuffed, right? They can't really do more than what the institution is able to get them to be able to do in terms from a trackability perspective. Because even that second one, which is definitely where my team is held responsible for on the financial side, it's having a way to be able to truly measure what marketing is responsible for. Because as often is the case, it's both a blessing and a curse. Marketing is held accountable and responsible for everything, usually when times are bad. And things aren't working well, we'll get blamed. But if it's just something where, again, you're taking credit for activity that really had nothing to do with messaging that you were putting out there, it can be a little bit wonky in terms of how that is done, which is why I think volumes at times tends to be more of the classic way of having things get measured. But it's always good to push to see whether you're able to really step into that role of how do we take it a step further without doing the classic things like, how did you hear about us? And where did you, how did you figure that? Because I think people just aren't super truthful there. But having that trackability largely on the digital front to be able to know exactly what you put into something and what that is on the back end, and then having a way to be able to then measure that. You have to hold those accounts open for a certain period of time, because it takes time for those individuals, once they're hit with a message, to work their way through from beginning to end. It's an investment in a partnership for sure.
Yeah.
But I will I will point out, Alan, I know there was one question in the Q&A that talked about NPS score in terms of whether that was something that was also a good measure or not. And absolutely. I mean, again, I think each institution, whoever you're involved with, will have a different realm of whether brand awareness and overall kind of reputation is an issue versus whether like that's solid and good and you need to really focus more on the acquisition side. So I think that is something that even when things are good, and at Cedars, really, we're not really an institution that suffers from a branding problem. But I still leverage NPS all the time because we have strong competition and people who really do feel that this is an institution only for celebrities and you have to have a certain number of income to attach to your name to get through the secret password in the door. All these things which are challenging and make it that way. To see what that is from an overall, would you recommend this place? Would you really use this as your destination for you and your family, is hugely important.
Absolutely. And I think that the poll responses, sorry, 1 second, James, it's kind of consistent with some of our survey findings that I'm showing you all here. Sorry, James, go ahead.
Oh, just if I could circle back to measurement KPIs and whatnot, I'm wondering if our audience, some of them would sheepishly admit to less quantitative evaluation of their success. And I'm not encouraging this, of course, but there is a world of systems that can't really measure their impact. And they fall back, again, not that I'm endorsing this, to CEO approval of their efforts or just a general sense that, yeah, things seem to be going well, or our doctors seem to be happy. And I'm wondering if that's a phenomena that's widespread, or perhaps more widespread than it should be. Gordon, do you have thoughts? Like, have you seen that? Or Tom, have you seen that? And how would you encourage people to get past that? Because I don't think any of us want to be in that position of a qualitative assessment of our effectiveness.
Tom, you're still on mute, bud.
Sorry about that. No, I'll start. I mean, I think many organizations start qualitatively because a lot of them are handcuffed by data. I think that's Gordon's one of his earlier points. So no, I think that's also why paid media is sometimes so effective, or perceived to be effective, because you can at least get some metrics and some dollars out of that piece. So I think there's always a little bit of art with our marketing. I mean, I come at digital marketing from a very tech data perspective, but at the end of the day, you do need to measure the effectiveness because it's a human base. I mean, marketing is always about three things. So it's the audience, the message, and getting them to do something, right? So when we look at that, there is a qualitative aspect to how effective we believe those things are. But in the world we exist in today, you really need numbers, and specifically in healthcare marketing, where a lot of your audiences are physicians or physician leadership. They're scientists by training. So you need to walk in the door if you're going to the heart and vascular center or cardiology or orthopedics and come in with data and show and tell the story. So I think qualitative still has its place, but quantitative should be typically the leader for that, and then follow with the qualitative work would be my recommendation.
I'm so with you.
So we have some comments from our audience as well. An anonymous attendee says it's a mix. Some folks just don't believe the data either. They want to be able to have the final say in whether it worked or not. So maybe that's true in healthcare, and I can definitely see how that's true in certain health systems. Another question that we have from Mr. Larry Mead. Do any of you work or partner with value-based care or pop health teams to create shared goals and KPIs between marketing and clinical teams to improve things like care gaps, outcomes, etc.?
I can jump in on this one. And this is another incredibly important, hugely powerful piece that I think a lot of teams are probably working on. And at least the way it is at Cedars is that we're helping craft a lot of the communications that go out for those individuals who are really trying to put into a particular path of trying to make sure that they're observing and following the right approach and protocols for value-based care. We do a lot when it comes to working with physicians to be able to work on their end to make sure that they're having the right utilization rates and not kind of overextending what they provide to their patients, which is always very tricky and cumbersome to be able to kind of communicate that. And then for our patients, that's a huge step that we do partner a lot on our side when we deal with a lot of our insurance communications, particularly for those of Medicare age. I do spend quite a bit of time with our managed care team and our value-based team to make sure that we're serving up appropriate communications as to why Medicare Advantage plans, for instance, are a tremendous opportunity for individuals to be able to opt into, so that they're able to, again, have things that are way more affordable, provide better benefits, and then conversely for our institution, take away a little bit of the losses that we typically incur on that payer mix side. So I do think this is something that is hugely important and probably would be very different depending on your volume, your payer mix, where you're located in terms of your geographic area and the patients that engage with them. And the challenge is probably, the temptation is that it's not super sexy. It's not something that is going to be a massive campaign that would reach more the classic advertising and marketing ways. But how do you help out from a communication to be able to make sure that those messages are getting through, and then measuring it through whatever the sort of data points that is relevant to keep track of that.
So another question came in from one of our audience members. I think this kind of aligns the pop health. How have systems incorporated wellness and health into their marketing strategies to reach communities before they're sick? We know healthcare systems are challenged to be able to be all things to all people. What community partnerships have provided the most impact to the care of the communities? I think this aligns with kind of the previous questions of partnering and servicing the population, the community that you're responsible for. What are some things at Cedar, Gordon, that you guys are exploring? And then beyond that, Tom, some of the clients that you're working with to incorporate some of these strategies?
I mean, there's so much in this question because there's many components to what is being outlined here. So on the one hand, it ties to, I think, what we were referencing earlier about ways to keep people from a retention and a loyalty perspective and an engagement. So it's not just about, where they are when they're really, really sick or need intervention at that time, but also keeping them engaged when they're healthy and they're in a situation where things are going well for them and or their family, wherever they are in that spectrum. So, I mean, we're really in the beginning stages of being able to roll up our marketing automation and CRM chops of trying to develop good targeted content marketing, which I know is another question in the Q&A, of really engaging with folks when they're healthy and things are going well, to make them understand ways to continue that and to keep them loyal and sticky, so that if things do go wrong, they're able to think of us in that process. And so that's a very good segue and tie-in to urgent care activity and primary care activity. Again, things that are not necessarily super attractive from a financial perspective, but definitely keep people engaged and sticky in the system, which is extremely important. And then for us at Cedars, we have a ton of community benefit programs and activities that we do that will manifest, at least in the Marcom side, in a variety of ways, whether it's us helping out, drafting those messages, providing the content and the swag and the promo items when we're doing various events in the community. We have a lot of activities that we do to be able to provide vaccinations and free healthcare in various areas. And so doing what we can to get that message across for sure. And then another thing, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, but of course we still do it, which is overall sports sponsorships, which is, again, I'm sure a piece that a lot of folks do. And it takes a boatload of money and a lot of time and effort. But for us, what we found most successful in our sponsorships is partnering with those teams in their various community programs. And that's all about promoting health and wellness.
Yeah, I think Gordon covered a lot of ground there. So there's certainly I would go back a little bit on the care gaps and pop health stuff. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of value in that space, and particularly for reimbursements with bundled care. So we do a lot of work in that area, and I think it's not, as Gordon says, it's not very sexy, but it's what people need to make sure that they're getting the care they need and keeping them engaged and keeping them healthy. I think health and wellness is one of the things that, as an industry, we don't do nearly well enough. Like once again, it drives primary care, which isn't always the best fee-for-service model, but for keeping people healthy, it should be in our nurtures and continuous communications, because we want to remain top of mind and retain the loyalty, as Gordon mentioned. And I think that is, we typically have a nurture stream after our campaigns about health and wellness related to whatever the campaign was, because it's that important. And if we're going to bend the healthcare cost curve in the US, we have to keep people healthy, right? We can't just be fixing sick people all the time. So it's much more cost effective and life effective to stay healthy than it is to try to get back to healthy.
Absolutely.
The only thing I'd add, and that's like wonderful advice from Tom and Gordon, is I would encourage all healthcare marketers just to continue to pay attention to the emergence of what we're calling payviders, which aligns the incentive to manage costs and deliver high quality care. Allegedly, I know it's more nuanced than that, but I'm talking about United Health, which is now 70,000 physicians strong, delivering care, keeping people out of high cost care delivery systems. But I'm also talking CVS Aetna, I'm talking Kaiser Permanente, now Geisinger. There's an emergence here of a model that aligns incentives. And maybe we're like going to jump from the frying pan into the fire with like yet another set of problems. But I am excited about the possibility of incentives being aligned to keep people healthy and keep them out of expensive care delivery systems, and bend the cost curve. Yeah. So I would encourage all healthcare marketers to be paying attention to those. They are emerging, they're growing fast, and obviously they were in the news as recently as today.
Right. All right, as we enter kind of the home stretch of this webinar, something I like to end with is, what should healthcare marketers be focused on? So I'd like to start with the audience. We have a poll here. Would love to know, for those of you who are viewing and participating in today's conversation, what is the single most important initiative for healthcare marketers to focus on this year, the next 12 to 18 months? So please take a couple of seconds. Would love to kind of understand who we're talking to. And, as you're completing this, Gordon, what are your thoughts? What's the single most important initiative for you as a healthcare marketer in the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great group of stuff here for sure, because again, it speaks to a lot of the key pieces, both on the awareness and the acquisition side. Again, for where we are in our institution, it will be, tied to acquisition and really held responsible for more on the net income side for us. So it's, again, tying in right levels of the right volume that we're trying to go after. That speaks to where we have opportunities, where there are really areas of growth, where the experience is going to be solid, where we know from a reimbursement perspective, we're able to make some good movements and tractions, and then being able to demonstrate that through our integration and our ways to be able to connect to our data warehouse.
That makes sense. Tom, is this in alignment with the majority of the clients that you work with?
It is. I mean, I think the end, when I was looking at the poll, it's like all the above, right? So it's hard to say that we can just focus on one of those things, given that they all impact revenue and utilization and capacity. I mean, I think the most important thing we can do as healthcare marketers right now is try to maintain focus. There's a lot of fray in the marketplace, a lot of pressures inside the organization, but we only have finite resources. So where can we move the needle the most for the health system, which I think, to Gordon's point, is finding those areas where we can impact and help support the mission, which requires some margin to move us forward.
Right. And I think that aligns very well with kind of our survey findings as well, in the survey report, which we'll share here shortly. But if you take a look at, what we found in the healthcare marketers that we were able to get in front of, patient volume appointments, along with new patient acquisition, continue to be a key area of focus. And I suspect that, this is true as well in retail health. Would you agree with that, James?
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for that on-ramp to something I'm very passionate about, which is the emergence of non-traditional delivery mechanisms for primary care. whether it's digital or whether it's employee or based solutions, or whether it's retail health solutions, which I've put a lot of thought into. And I'm thinking specifically of CVS, Walgreens, Amazon, and other giants, up to and including Best Buy and Dollar General, increasingly moving towards the delivery of primary care, which has profound implications, obviously. And it's not nationwide and it's market by market specific, but we can all imagine the pros and cons of competing with giants who have customer experience in their DNA, who have convenience and high quality care kind of in their mindset, and want to disrupt this on-ramp into the world of hospital systems. So I'm watching that really closely. So thanks for that plug. I'd also be remiss not to mention generative AI as yet another thing that I'm watching really closely. I think it's got exciting implications, obviously some risks and downsides and concerns that every marketer should be thinking about, but the opportunity to accelerate and improve the speed and quality of our content, whether it's text or images, given that that's a huge role of every hospital marketer, we should all be watching that with a lot of excitement and curiosity and caution.
Absolutely. One of the things that we didn't talk about, that a question that came in from the audience, I'd like to have someone address here, from Amy Clyde. Please comment on the role of content marketing. I think content is king, obviously, and that's the genesis of any marketing program. Would love to get some thoughts on, what is the importance of content marketing in healthcare and where is it going?
Well, I mean, to me, content is the fuel and the engine of marketing, right? So if you think about, when we go back to that slide which showed CRM, marketing automation, media, call centers, right? There's got to be content at all those touch points to get the message across. And I think to James's point, generative AI is actually a place that we'll think about in the future. We'll be able to generate personalized content on the fly beyond the kind of the logical personalized content we do today. So content marketing to me is weaved into all these things. Some of them are the technologies of deployment, but you need to have solid content, including the solid message. Brand, of course, brand lifts everything. Everything's easier with a great brand, as Gordon would probably nod on. So brand makes it all easier, but you have to have the fundamentals of content. The good news is for some of the smaller systems now with generative AI, you won't need legions of copywriters to do as much personalization as you have in the past. But to me, content marketing becomes more and more important as we evolve over the next several years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would echo that fully. I mean, again, the key is being able to serve up information that really is of interest to the audience, whatever that might be. And that's a challenge because it could be, seen in so many different ways and result in a factory of resources. But I think Tom's silver lining is spot on. And it's going to take time to be able to really do this effectively without kind of having it be, again, that you're hiring 20 million individuals and or a certain number of agencies to be able to spit out a bunch of this stuff. But I think the sort of old school way of having one-way communication that may be, hit and check off all the boxes where your internal folks feel like they've been represented and heard, versus really what is engaging with consumers and information that they want to see and in ways they want to be able to get that. That's the key. And it ties, to the last question, Alan, that the anonymous person wrote, which is healthcare in general is so conservative and a lot of these other, areas can be more progressive. How do you match and mirror that? And it's spot on. I mean, if I could eliminate all usages of smiling parents with kids or, people looking lovingly at each other, which is what every sort of institution is, not that I'm against either of those things. But it's just tired. And it's so, vanilla and the same every single time, and it's really hard to be the one to break through that, because again, it's effective in certain ways and it's dangerous in certain ways, and so many folks within these institutions have been there for exorbitant amount of time and are very risk averse in many ways, and so it makes it very challenging to do anything super innovative without having a big target on your back.
Warren, I love the way that you're thinking, and I love what you're saying here, and I can't wait for all of that to happen. So let me create some controversy here between you and James. Who does it better, content marketing retail or health systems?
Oh, there can't be controversy. I love these guys. Come on. No, I can't say I've seen great content marketing coming out of the retail health world. So I'm not going to celebrate something that I don't really feel strongly about. Obviously, Walmart, CVS, Amazon, and whatnot, they have the capacity to excel at anything they choose to. There's several $500 billion organizations in that mix. So the potential for them to be great is endless, but I can't point to anything that I've specifically seen that I would say beats what Cedars is doing or what Mayo Clinic's doing or what Cleveland Clinic's doing. So prove me wrong and let's generate some controversy.
Yeah, no controversy. I was about to give you the throne, my friend. I mean, I don't think we have even a leg in the right category of doing it more innovatively and novelly. I would say the key that, you know, an institution like Cedars or Mayo or any of those folks that are kind of in that classic US News list is they have the name recognition and they have the sort of built-in stamp of expertise that justifies things being a little bit stale and flat. And we're guilty of that as well. But because it has, again, it comes from the place where people just assign that level of credibility and expertise, which is so insanely important, makes it easier to not innovate, which is, again, maybe that's what's the kick in the pants that everyone's going to need to get, is that's only going to carry you so far as, you know, the new generations come and people start wanting to engage in different ways. They may not assign the same level of value that a lot of us and our parents and other generations have assigned to those illustrious institutions versus like, talk to me the way that I want to be talked to in ways that I really want to engage in. And I'm just going to assume that the healthcare quality is going to be fine. So I think it's a problem for sure.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, looks like we are about out of time. If you have any other final questions from the audience, please do type it in the Q&A or the chat. In the chat, we have also posted access to our full survey research report. So feel free to access and download that now. If there's no further questions, Goran, James, Tom, thank you so much for your time and all the great insights that you've shared with us today. I definitely learned a lot and I had some great takeaways, key takeaways. I hope everyone joining us today did as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. As you exit today's webinar, please do take a few seconds to complete the survey upon your departure. It will be greatly appreciated and it will help us make better webinars for you in the future. Thank you, everyone.